Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, you may also call me Lo, and today's video is probably the most anticipated video of the year, at least on my end, and that is the best books that I read in 2022. So I'm going to be talking about 10 books in this video, and these are the 10 books that I rated 5 stars. I didn't rate a single other book 5 stars. These are the creme de la creme from 2022. Just for context, these are not books that came out in 2022. Some of them did, but some of them didn't. These are just my favorite books that I personally read this year. Before I get started, I do want to say that I'm still running the giveaway on my Twitter. So the link to my Twitter account is down below, and pinned at the top is this giveaway. And that giveaway is still running through January 1st. So if you'd like to enter, go ahead and do that. You can win 2 free books. One final thing before I get started, and that is that I am going to be showing you these books in chronological order of when I read them throughout the year. I cannot choose a favorite out of these. Like, I sat and thought about it for a long time, and there's absolutely no way. There is a vast array of genres here. The books are very different. Some are plot-driven, some are character-driven. It's a very, very well-rounded list of favorites, and I just don't think that they're similar enough to one another that I could possibly pick one. So these are not in order of how much I liked them, they are in order of when I read them. So without further ado, the first book that I gave 5 stars to in 2022 is a book that I do not own right now, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. So in January, I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book in this series, and I gave that 4 stars. I thought it was good. It's kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. We have our main character, Feyre, who basically is in charge of taking care of her family. She has 2 sisters and her father, and she's out in the woods trying to basically like find food to feed her family, and she ends up killing this wolf. Later, we come to find out that the wolf that Feyre killed was not a wolf, but a fairy. And as punishment, Feyre is taken to the Fey world to basically live out the rest of her days there. And as you can imagine, there's kind of a love story with a fairy there. So that book I gave 4 stars. Again, it's very, very Beauty and the Beast retelling. No doubt about it. It's pretty on the mark. With that said, I really enjoyed it and I wanted to immediately read the next book, which I think says a lot. So then I picked up A Court of Mist and Fury, which I gave 5 stars. Hard 5 stars. It was so, so good. So without spoiling it, in the second book, everything kind of that we learn in the first book gets flipped on its head. And it's just action-packed. It's got a really great romance. All the characters are amazing. I just fell head over heels for this book, and I cannot emphasize that enough. It was amazing. The third book I ended up giving 4.5, and I haven't read the 4th book yet, so I will definitely get to that in 2023, but for sure my favorite book in this series is the second one, so if you did read the first one and you were like, it was okay, I would continue. Like, I really, really would. The second book is top tier. Top tier. Another thing I can say about Sarah J. Maas, though, is that I don't really like the Crescent City series. I only read the first book, House of Earth and Blood, and I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was okay. And after reading that, I was like, I don't think I want to read the Court of Thorns and Roses series. Like, I probably won't like it. I was wrong. So don't be like me. If you read the first book in the Crescent City series and you were like, I didn't really like this, I don't really like Sarah J. Maas, definitely try this series. Please, please, please don't sleep on this series. The next book is so far out of left field for me. It's the type of book that normally I absolutely hate, but it worked for me in this particular instance, and somehow this book made it to the top 10, and I'm not upset about it. Like, this book is phenomenal. And that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. How to describe this book. This is an adult sci-fi. It's a novella. It's pretty short. It's 198 pages, and it's written in like epistolary format. So we've got letters back and forth between our 2 characters, Red and Blue, and Red and Blue are fighting this kind of futuristic time war, and they are on opposing sides of this war. And at the beginning of the book, one of them leaves a letter for the other, and it kind of launches this correspondence between these two parties who are A, not supposed to interact, and B, like, not supposed to get along. And as they keep exchanging these letters back and forth, they eventually fall in love with one another. And that is what this story is. The reason that I say that this isn't the type of book that I normally would like is that this is a very character-driven book, and it's very much about vibes rather than plot. So you never understand what this war is about, or who is winning the war, or why it's happening. And the things that are described in this book in terms of what Red and Blue are doing as agents on opposing sides of this war, you never learn, like, what the meaning of it is. Like, the plot isn't really there. It's really about the relationship between these two characters. And I'm, like, a plot-driven person in general. I like my characters to be well fleshed out, but if nothing is happening, I usually have a very hard time caring, and I usually get bored, and this has no plot. Like, it truly does not have a plot. So it's not something I thought I would like, but I'm glad I tried it because it was amazing, and I highly recommend it, and I gave it 5 stars. I gave every book in this video 5 stars. I'm sure I'm going to say that a billion times, but yeah, highly, highly, highly recommend this, and it's short, so what excuse do you have? The next book is a book that no one will be surprised is on this list because I've been talking about it constantly since I read it in March. And that is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. So this book was actually a nominee in the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Debut and Best Historical Fiction. It won neither, which I find literally devastating. But I voted for this in both of those categories. I thought this was a phenomenal book, and I actually read this as an arc in March with, like, very little expectation. Like, I really didn't think I would absolutely love it, and I read it, and I cried, and it just shook my everything. Like, this book is everything. In this book, we're following Benny and Byron, who are estranged adult siblings. And their mother dies unexpectedly, and the two of them have to go to Southern California to take care of her estate and all the stuff that comes with losing a parent. So they meet with their mother's lawyer, who basically tells them that their mother's last wish was for them to listen to this audio recording that she recorded before they deal with any of the other stuff. So the two of them start listening to this recording, and through the recording, which is basically the story of their mother's life, they learn that their mother has kept a lot of secrets and that their mother isn't really the person that they thought that she was. It's so good. So we get the audio recording in this book, and then we also get Benny's perspective, Byron's perspective, and then we also get the perspectives of various people in their mother's life and who are somehow related to their family. So this is very much like a multi-generational story. It's also a story where someone's telling the story of their life, which is something that I tend to really love for whatever reason. And it's about kind of a strained sibling relationship, and it's also about grief, and I just loved this book. It's also got like a big kind of mystery aspect because you're trying to figure out how their mother got from point A to point B, and it's all kind of told in this sort of, I don't want to say convoluted way, but it's told in a very like kind of complex, multifaceted way, and it's just so amazing. Like, I fell in love with this book. I literally gave this to everyone in my family for Christmas. Like, this book is so amazing. It's so underhyped, so please pick it up. And if you do, on my recommendation, please let me know what you think of it, because I feel like nobody is talking about this book, and it truly blew me away as a person who went into this book thinking like, I might like it, I might not, I don't know. Next we have another short book. It's not only short, but it's also similar to Black Cake, a book where someone is telling someone else about their past, which again, is something that I'm learning that I really, really love in books, and that is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. So, first of all, I found like a author that I absolutely love in Nevo after reading this book. I bought all of her books. I have not read all of them, but I'm working on it. This is an adult fantasy novella. It's super short. And this is another one that like I didn't expect to love. Like, I really usually don't love novellas because they're just so short that it's hard to get into the story for me, and it's hard to really care about the characters in that very, very short amount of time. But this absolutely changed my mind about that. This follows our main character, Chi, who is a cleric, and Chi's job is basically to travel around this fantastical world and talk to people and record their stories. So it's got a big kind of storytelling aspect, which I just love. So this is a series, and I read all of the books this year, but this one was definitely my favorite. So in this one, Chi goes to the palace of this exiled empress, and the empress is gone. She no longer lives there. But there, Chi meets Rabbit, and Rabbit is this old woman who lives there and happened to be the handmaiden of this empress. And in every chapter, Rabbit is telling more and more kind of stories about this empress and her relationship with this empress. And it was just so good. It was so good. This is like the height of cozy fantasy. Like, I eventually, at some point, will make a video about cozy fantasy books because that's like legitimately my favorite genre, and this will be on it. Like, this is such a cozy, atmospheric book, and it was so good. It was so good. This is another super short book. Like, again, no excuse. This is 118 pages. Like, flies by, you can read it in a day, and it's phenomenal. Highly recommend it. The next book I was absolutely sure I was going to love, but I avoided reading it because of the length, which is a problem that I have and I'm trying to stop. But that book is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. So this book is a whopping 485 pages, and this book is kind of hard to describe, but it is an adult historical fiction book. And we're following this Korean family throughout the generations, starting in the early 1900s and ending like close to present day. I can't say exactly when because I read this book a while ago now, but we're really spanning many, many, many years. The story really kicks off with Sunja, and again, at this point in the story, we're in the early 1900s, and she basically falls in love with this kind of mysterious, very wealthy stranger, and she ends up pregnant out of wedlock. At the time, that is like the worst thing that could happen. She's like going to bring shame to her family. It's a very bad situation. And she's sort of saved by this minister who actually lives in Japan. And he basically says like, listen, I'll marry you. I'll raise this child with you. I don't want you to bring shame to your family. And Sunja and her mother had actually nursed this minister back to health after kind of a bout of tuberculosis. So it's sort of like an exchange. So we have Sunja basically moving to Japan, and at the time, Koreans were discriminated against in Japan pretty significantly. And we follow this Korean family in Japan throughout the generations. I think that what makes this book so special is that we follow this family and different members of this family throughout such a long time that no matter what happens, like, you are so invested in these characters and in this family, and all you want is for them to succeed and be happy and stop struggling. And I was so invested in this. I also learned a lot about Korea and Japan through this book. It's devastating at times. It's so hopeful at times. It's so, so good. If you're a fan of historical fiction, please read this. Like, this is truly amazing. It's like a modern classic at this point, but if you haven't read it, like, please do. And don't be intimidated by the length, because it's worth it. Every single page of this book is worth it. So that is Pachinko. I can't recommend this book enough. I can't believe I sat on it for so long. Like, don't be like me. Like, please, please read this book. Next is a YA sci-fi by an author who I have not failed to give 5 stars to every single book that I've read by them, so we're not shocked. And that is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This book takes place on a planet that is constantly under attack by this alien species called the Krell. And to fight off the Krell, there are these fighter pilots who are constantly kind of battling them. And because of that, the fighter pilots in this society are like the most elite people. And our main character, Spensa, has spent her whole life dreaming of becoming a fighter pilot. However, Spensa is the disgraced daughter of a former fighter pilot who abandoned his team and died in that battle, and she and her mother are considered the family of a traitor, which is the absolute worst thing that you could be in this society. So Spensa is facing a lot of barriers to becoming a fighter pilot, but one day she discovers this abandoned ship, and she realizes that the ship might be her ticket to finally achieving her dream. This book was a ride. It was so emotional. It's Brandon Sanderson. Like, it was perfection. Like, just by saying it's Brandon Sanderson, you know that it was perfection. The characters in this were so great. Spensa is like slightly annoying because she's like a teenager, but I still loved her. I loved her family. I loved all the characters in this fighter pilot school. There was like a mystery aspect to this with like what happened to her father and why he did what he did. I was in it. Like, I was in it. I loved every minute of this. I have yet to continue this series, but I highly recommend this. It was so fun, but it was also like very emotionally charged at times, and I just absolutely loved it. Like, so amazing. So good. Yeah. If you haven't read any Brandon Sanderson, this is honestly a good place to start. Like, for real, it's YA. It's a little bit more accessible than like the Stormlight Archive, which I've also started, and that is not accessible to a like fantasy beginner. So if you want to dive in, I definitely would read this. If you're new to sci-fi but you want to get into it, this is a great place to start. It was so good. It was so, so good. I can't wait to continue this series. The next one I also do not own, and this is a YA graphic novel. If you had told me there would be a YA graphic novel on this list, I would have told you that you were crazy. It's also a romance, which I kind of got into a little bit more this year, but was definitely something that I didn't like in the past. And that book is Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. I read every book in this series also this year. The first installment was by far my favorite, and this book follows Nick and Charlie, who are 2 high school students. Nick is like a jock rugby player, and Charlie is this very like relatable, kind of awkward kid who's just so, so lovable. Both of them are so lovable. And we find out that Charlie was outed at school the year before, and he's still dealing with a lot of kind of fallout from that, and Nick is not out. So the 2 of them meet, and they have this really like sweet, adorable connection. And the book is mostly from Charlie's perspective, as he like has this major crush on Nick, and he's not sure if Nick feels the same way, and Nick isn't out, and it's like complicated. This book really gave me the feeling that you have at the beginning of a relationship when you really like someone and you don't know if they like you back. It kind of like brings back that angst and really gives you that feeling. Truly beautiful. I absolutely loved it. This book is also like available for free online, and this whole series was great. I just loved the first book the most. So that is that. If you haven't dived into the series, you definitely should. They're so easy to get through. They're like one-day reads, tops. Highly, highly recommend. I loved this. It made me feel a lot of emotions. The next book is Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukafka. This book is not like necessarily enjoyable to read, I'm not going to lie, but it brings up a very important conversation, and I think it's like a very, very valuable book. and I couldn't give it less than 5 stars. Like I really could not. So this book follows Ansel Packer, and Ansel Packer is on death row, and he is going to be executed in 12 hours. And between his chapters, where he's basically just like coming to terms with the fact that he's going to die, we get the perspectives of various women throughout Ansel Packer's life. Some of them love Ansel Packer, some of them hate Ansel Packer, and through their stories we basically get this very like complex, multifaceted understanding of who Ansel Packer really is. And I think what's really like genius about this book is that it doesn't shy away from the horrible things that Ansel Packer has done. You understand the severity and awfulness of the things that Ansel Packer has done, but you also have this very like in-depth understanding of who he is as a human being, and just that he is a human being. And at the end of the book, at least for me, I was like, I really do not want this man to die. Like, I know he's done bad things, but why are we killing him? I think it's such a genius book in terms of like contextualizing the death penalty in the United States. And ultimately, this book is a statement kind of against the death penalty in the United States. And I think it just is phenomenal. And it's like one of those things that I don't know if I'd reread, but I think it just has so much value. And if it sounds like something that you would like, and you're in a mood to like think about things that are difficult to think about, I highly recommend this. I thought it was amazing. Like, I thought it was incredible, truly. Next is another book by an author that I've historically really loved, so it wasn't really a shocker. And that is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this book takes place in the same kind of universe as The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I gave 5 stars to. And in this book, we're following 4 siblings. And these 4 siblings are the children of Mick Riva, who is the, I don't know which number husband, but he's one of the husbands in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So we're following these 4 kids who basically throw this party in Malibu every year. And as the years have gone on, this party has become bigger and wilder and kind of more like fancy as the oldest sibling, Nina Riva, has become kind of famous in her own right for being this like model slash surfer. We find out early on that this year's party is going to end in flames. The whole house is going to be on fire by the end of the night. And we're both learning about the Rivas and their kind of history as a family. We're also learning about each sibling and kind of their various kind of secrets and things that they're keeping from one another. And we're also kind of building up to understanding why this fire happened and why the night is going to end how it's going to end. I don't know if I can really say more, to be honest, but this was a work of art. I loved all the Riva children. I thought that the sibling relationships in this book were so incredibly well done. I thought that the ending was beautiful and like poetic and amazing. And I just love Taylor Jenkins Reid. Like, she makes me feel things, always. And I love her for it. I love her for it. If you haven't read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo yet, you definitely don't have to read that before reading this, but I would, because there's like Easter eggs and generally the stories are like somewhat related. So if you love The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, this is like more fun in my opinion, but loved this. Highly recommend it. Taylor Jenkins Reid, like, I will always read her books. Always, always, always. Similar to Brandon Sanderson. Last but not least is a book that I read in December, so I have not even included this in a wrap-up yet, but it absolutely had to make it into this list. Absolutely. It was so phenomenal. And that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. So I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which is a book that people love. And I gave it 3 stars. Like, I just didn't really like it. I thought that there wasn't enough plot. I thought that I was promised things that I didn't get. And I thought it was a meh book. So when this book came out, I was like, Am I gonna try? I don't know. At some point this year I decided I was, and I bought the book and I read it, and my goodness, was it life-changing. Like truly, truly amazing. So in this book we're following Zachary Ezra Rollins, who is a grad student, and he kind of spends his days like going to the library, picking up books, reading all of them, returning the next day, and doing that over and over and over again. One day he discovers this book in the library and he starts to read it, and it's a very strange book. It's like all about this mysterious underground library called the Starless Sea, and eventually he gets to a chapter that's literally about him. Like, he is the main character in the short story, and it's about something that happened to him as a child, which is something that he like hasn't really thought about since it happened. And the end of the chapter kind of insinuates that Zachary is eventually going to find the Starless Sea. So this sends Zachary on this crazy, crazy journey to try to find the Starless Sea. He's collecting clues, he's trying to figure it out. There's a lot of kind of mysterious stuff going on. And we also get snippets from the books that Zachary is reading while this book is going on. So I think it's got like 4 or 5 books within this book, and all the stories are very interconnected. It's like this crazy spider web of connections. And I did vlog about this, and I did say this in that vlog, but I think it's important to say that, like, I don't know how Erin Morgenstern wrote this book. It is truly crazy to me. Like, genius. It's truly genius. Like, I can't imagine what it was like and how much work went into writing this book. It's beautiful. Also, the writing in this is like top tier lyrical writing. Like, if you love lyrical writing, you're going to fall in love with this story. It is so good. And it's kind of weird. It's got like strange moments, especially toward the end. I even was like, what is going on? But I was still loving every second of it. I think I could easily read this book again and find things that I didn't see the first time or didn't understand the first time. But regardless, I enjoyed every page of this. And this is a very, very long book. 494 pages, so kind of a chunky one, but it was so good. It was so good! I'm so glad that I read this year. Like, I could have sat on this until next year, and I ended up slipping it in at the end of the year, and it's such a hard 5-star book for me, and I'm just so happy. I'm so happy I read it. And I invested in this like gorgeous edition of it, so we love that for me. So I also rated a lot of books 4.5 stars this year, and I do want to include those in this video as like honorable mentions. I'm not going to talk about them extensively, but I do want to like rapid fire hold them up and tell you what they are, because I want to include all the best books in this video. Like, I want you to have one video that you can go to and be like, Lo read all of these books this year and she loved all of them, and here they are. And the 4.5 stars, no, they're not my favorites, but they're very, very close. Like, highly, highly super recommend them. So here we go. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Jade City by Fonda Lee. Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. And A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I think that the only one that I don't own is In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. That one was also phenomenal. Highly recommend it. And there you go. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Those are my favorite books that I read this year, and I loved all of them so much. And if you read any of them on my recommendation, please let me know. I'd love to hear what you think of them. If you're new to my channel, please consider liking this video and subscribing. I put one bookish video out every week, sometimes 2, if I can pull it off. If you're still here, thank you so much for being here. I always really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.